Hey guys, thanks for checking out this video. Today I just wanted to take a few moments to talk about a very controversial issue that's in our culture right now, and that is abortion. And we hear a lot of information about this, but I wanted to give as clear of an explanation of what the Bible has to say about abortion. But I want to say this first. I want to say that my goal is not to create shame, guilt, or division. My goal is to shine a light on an issue that is extremely important to God. That is the life of the unborn. Also, I want to say this. I feel like we could do a whole talk on this. To disagree is not to hate. And to disagree is not an excuse to be hateful. Like if you disagree with me, that's okay. I don't hate you. You shouldn't think that I'm being hateful for having a different point of view. So we just need to remember this in all of our conversations about anything in our culture today, that to disagree is not to hate. Those are not things that go together. So just want to say that up front. Also want to say that God offers grace and forgiveness for those that have had an abortion, performed an abortion, or encouraged someone to have an abortion. There is grace and forgiveness. There is no sin that is unforgivable, even the sin of abortion. So I just want to be clear about that. Now, just for a few moments, I want to walk through some key passages that we would look at in the Bible as far as the sanctity of life. First one, very famous, Psalm 139 says, "For you formed me in my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth." That's just a way of saying in the womb. Your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there was none of them. So we have this very famous passage of Scripture that clearly says that God forms us in our mother's womb. He knew us. He numbered our days. And He has a plan for us, that we're created on purpose for a purpose, even in the womb. Another passage of Scripture, Jeremiah 1:5, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart." So we see that even in the life of Jeremiah, that God knew him before he was even born. That there is this personhood, this knowledge of God for every human being, even in the womb. Another passage I would point to is Exodus 21. It says, "If people are fighting and hit a pregnant woman and she gives birth prematurely, but there is no serious injury, the offender must be fined whatever the woman's husband demands and the court allows." Now listen to this. "But if there is a serious injury, you are to take life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise." So here's what we find in that passage of Scripture as we look at the Old Testament law from the very beginning. Here's what happened. God established for Israel a law code that placed a higher value on protecting the life of a pregnant woman and her unborn child than the life of anyone else in Israelite society. And that comes from a very reputable passage of Scripture and a resource on theology. So we just realize that even from the beginning, God placed an extremely high value on life, even in the womb. Now, here's the key thought in this discussion. If you're ever having a discussion or debate with someone, here's the key thought. If the unborn is a human being, and my view is, scientifically and biblically it is, killing him or her for any reason is a serious moral wrong that violates biblical commands against the unjust taking of human life. So I just want to say that up front. That is a key thought. Now here's a key truth, just a little bit different. The science of embryology, and we're going to look at some of this in just a moment, the science of embryology clearly shows that from the moment of fertilization, the unborn are distinct, living, and whole human beings. They are not parts of other human beings, but whole living organisms able to direct their own internal development. Therefore, every elective abortion ends the life of a living human being. And we're going to look at that in just a minute. In fact, let's look at one right now. Here's something. This is from a Harvard Medical School professor. It says, it is incorrect to say that biological data cannot be decisive, talking about when life begins. It is scientifically correct to say that an individual human life begins at conception. This is not from a religious scholar. This is from Harvard Medical School that clearly says that life begins at fertilization, at conception. Another one is this. The beginning of a single human life is from a biological point of view, a simple and straightforward matter. The beginning is conception. From Dr. Watson at the University of Colorado Medical School. Once again, this is not coming from a religious person per se. This is coming from someone that's looking simply at the science. So here's another one. During the process of fertilization, the sperm and the egg cease to exist as such, and a new human being is produced. This is a biochemist and biologist who is a professor at Georgetown University. Once again, this is someone outside of the religious argument, just simply saying that it is a life from the moment of conception. Here's another one. Physicians, biologists, and other scientists agree that conception marks the beginning of the life of a human being, a being that is alive and is a member of the human species. There is overwhelming agreement on this point in countless medical, biological, and scientific writings. This was a report before the Senate subcommittee. So we've had plenty of people that have went before Congress and made this argument that life begins at conception. Another one, the product of fertilization is a living human being with 46 chromosomes. Fertilization refers to the initiation of a new human being. In other words, the distinct genetic identity of the unborn child shows that he or she is far different from any part of the mother's own body. For every cell in the mother's body contains the mother's DNA, not the child's. Once again, comes from Wayne Grudem. It's an important point that the child in the womb is not a part of the woman's body. That is an argument that's used by radical feminists, but that's just not true. It is a unique human being with their own DNA. Another thing to consider, this is what it says, it is possible to give human being a precise meaning. Whether a being is a member of a given species is something that can be determined scientifically by an examination of the nature of the chromosomes in the cells of living organisms. In this sense, there is no doubt that from the first moments of its existence, an embryo conceived from human sperm and eggs is a human being. Now look who this is. Peter Singer. He is a pro-abortion supporter. So he flat out admits that what we are killing in the womb is a human being. There's no argument, even from someone that is a pro-abortion advocate. Another thing we can look at, the science of embryology is clear. The unborn are distinctly human from the moment of fertilization. By day 43, the fetus produces brain waves. If an EEG can determine when a person is dead, why can't it determine when a person is alive? That's a very valid question. Using brainwave activity to define life would outlaw at least a majority of abortions. That's a powerful thing to think about. Another thing to think about, the biology of human fetal development has been clearly documented. To summarize this process, consider a few of the hallmarks of human fetal development. So here's a few of those. First of all, 5 to 9 days after conception, the sex of the baby can be identified. By day 24, the heart begins to beat. By day 30, the child has a separate blood supply flowing through its veins. By day 43, we can detect brain waves in the child. By week 8, the baby has all organs present. By week 10, the baby is sensitive to touch. By the end of the first trimester, 13 weeks, the baby has vocal cords. I mean, those are things that we need to consider. We need to realize that this thing inside of a woman is a human being that is one of us. It's not something different. It is a human being. The unborn can feel pain, the pain of being aborted. Feinberg and Feinberg write, A.W. Liley, a respected professor of fetal psychology at the National Women's Hospital in Auckland, New Zealand, has demonstrated that, and this is horrible, but think about this, an 11-week-old fetus can experience pain and respond to touch, light, heat, and noise. That's at 11 weeks. Liley has shown through the use of closed-circuit television cameras that such a child will feel pain when pricked with a needle. Moreover, if a beep is used before the prick several times, the baby will recoil at the beep alone. We have proof that they can feel pain. They know that there's something happening. There is pain that is felt in the womb. That is one of the greatest lies that's told on the pro-abortion side, is that it's just tissue and it doesn't feel anything. It's not true when you look at what science says. The Bible's view on abortion is supported by science. So, answers to arguments for abortion. No one knows when human life begins. So here's the thing. Can we justify killing what might be a human being? Should we shoot at a moving object in the woods if we are not sure whether or not it is human? Then neither should we kill babies if we are not sure they are not human. So it's a very logical argument. If we don't know, why take a chance? The argument is, if you see something in the woods and you've got a gun, you don't shoot it if you think it could be a human being. If there's any chance, you don't shoot it. The same is true with a child in the womb. If it might be a human being, which I agree it is, you wouldn't even take a chance. We would err on the side of caution. Another one, a woman has the right to control her own body. Scientifically, a baby is not part of its mother's body. It is an individual human being with its own separate body. To be sure, the mother is feeding the unborn baby, but does a mother have the right to stop feeding her baby after it is born? This would be murder by starvation, and to cut off the source of life for a preborn baby would be just as wrong. So once again, we go back to the arguments from the medical professionals, from the people at Harvard and Georgetown. It is a separate human being inside with separate DNA. So it is a separate human being. It's not a part of the mother's body. So if you look at science, the unborn baby is not really human until it is born. This is kind of confusing. If it is not human before it is born, then what is it? It's a great question. Cows give birth to cows. Horses give birth to horses. No medical person has any difficulty identifying an unborn dog as a dog or an unborn pig as a pig. Why should there be any question about an unborn human? Which one of the things that confuses me is that in our country, like if you were to crush the egg of a sea turtle or crush the egg of a bald eagle, that would be considered a crime. But you can kill the life of a preborn child without it being any crime. In fact, some people call it health care. The unborn baby is not really human until it is born. So think about this. Since when does where one lives determine one's humanity? The difference between babies that are born and those that are unborn is not their essential nature. It is simply a matter of size and location. Like traveling 8 inches down a birth canal does not change what that child is. And that is what we're ignoring in our culture today. So you look at this picture. This is a picture from my oldest daughter. This is one of the first ultrasounds we had. This is a 3D ultrasound later on. This is her right after she was born. A few months, a couple of years, I think 5 years, and I think this was probably about 7 years old. So you see, at every stage, she is still a human being. It doesn't matter if she's located here in the earliest stages or here in the latter stages of development in the womb or after she travels down the birth canal. Human being, human being, human being, human being, human being, human being, human being. Valuable to God, valuable to God, valuable to God. So that's a strong argument. Size, so let's look at these different arguments. Size, yes, unborn babies are smaller than newborns, which I think mothers will be glad that's true, and adults, but why is that relevant? Do we really want to say that large people are more human than small ones? Men are generally larger than women, but that doesn't mean they deserve more rights. Size doesn't equal value. So any argument on the size of a child in the womb makes no logical sense. The others, once again, whether she's this size or whether she's this tall, doesn't make any difference. Size does not determine value. Level of development, true. Unborn babies are less developed than you and I. Of course they are. But again, why is this relevant? Four-year-old girls are less developed than 14-year-old girls. But what difference does it make about their value? The level of development of a human being does not determine its worth. It does not determine anything. They're all valuable. Let's look at this. Once again, you look at this example. The size and the level of development, whether she can, walk and talk and write and read, or whether or not she's completely reliant on the mother's body for its nourishment, does not make a difference. The level of development does not determine worth or value. Environment, where you are, has no bearing on who you are. Does your value change when you cross the street? Nope. Or roll over in bed? If not, how can a journey of 8 inches down the birth canal suddenly change the essential nature of the unborn from non-human to human? It makes no sense at all. Whether a child is in the womb or whether it is outside the womb does not determine whether it's a human being with value and dignity. Does not determine that. Degree of dependency. I hear this one a lot. Newborns, the mentally handicapped, those that rely on insulin, and conjoined twins who share blood type and bodily systems also depend on outside sources for their survival. Their dependency on others does not take away their humanity. So once again, you see, logically speaking, the degree of dependency does not make a difference. At this age, yes, she's completely dependent on her mother to supply everything she needs. Here, she can feed herself, but that does not make a difference in the value and worth and the humanity of a human being. Now, here's some more arguments. People are going to have abortions anyway. We might as well make it legal and safe. People say this. I always hear the whole, they're going to go back to coat hangers, which I don't think there's any documented case of anyone using a coat hanger for an abortion. So I think that's just a lie. Should we also legalize assisted suicide? Since people are going to commit suicide anyway, nobody would say that. Like if somebody's on the bridge down here and they're going to jump off, should we just go say, hey, they want to do it. Let's just help them on. Let's push them on. We would say that's completely foolish. Legalizing an evil does not make it morally right. It is wrong to kill yourself, and it is wrong to kill an unborn baby. Legalizing it doesn't make it right. Slavery was legal. It wasn't right. So think about that from a logical standpoint. Another, you don't have the right to force your morals on others through law. Love this one. Think about this. Should we get rid of all the laws we have that address moral issues? Our laws against murder, that's a moral issue, animal cruelty, theft, child abuse, incest, and rape. All of these are cases of morals being legislated. We could also eliminate anti-slavery laws along with all civil rights laws, for these also legislate moral behavior. So it makes no sense logically. So you have to understand that. Another one, unborn babies are not conscious human beings. So if consciousness determines humanness, then anyone who is asleep or lapses into a coma is not human. The logical conclusion from this is that it would never be murder to kill an unconscious person, And so all a killer needs to do is to escape murder charges would be just to knock out their victim before shooting them. That makes no sense to me, the whole argument of not being conscious beings. Also, I would say this about that same argument. Babies in the womb are conscious. By 4 to 6 weeks after conception, they have their own brain waves, which they will keep for the rest of their life. The absence of a brain wave is considered a sign of death. Why then is the presence of a brain wave not considered a sign of life? That's an answer that pro-abortion people need to come up with, because I need to hear that one. Another one, it is better to abort a baby than to allow it to grow up in an abusive environment. I've heard that from people that claim to be Christians. They have an argument that if they're going to grow up in a home that's probably going to be abusive, here's what I would say. The abortion process itself is horribly abusive. One common process tears the tissue of the tiny, defenseless unborn into pieces by violent suction. The D&C method of abortion uses a sharp instrument to chop the little baby into pieces. It is then scraped from the womb and trashed. The saline method replaces the amniotic fluid surrounding the baby with salt water, the sac into which the baby is immersed, then eats its skin off, and when the baby inhales this salt water, it burns up from the inside out. So if you're afraid of potential abuse, you're going to justify that by putting a child, a human being, through this. I don't see the argument there. So once again, if we protect the born who are undergoing child abuse, which we should, then we should all the more protect the unborn who are even more defenseless. Abortion is child abuse of the worst kind. Murder is not the solution to abuse or potential abuse. Protection is. Just because someone that we look at gets pregnant and we think, they should get an abortion because if that child's born, they're going to grow up in a home and probably not end up well off. They're going to be abused. Who knows what could happen? The solution is to protect that child once it's born, not to kill it, to keep it from potentially experiencing that. Protection is the answer. Now here, I think, is the most important thing that we can talk about when we talk about defending our view on abortion as believers. If an argument for abortion wouldn't be a valid reason to murder a child after it is born, it should not be a valid reason to murder a child before it is born. So let's just think about this when we look at this picture of my daughter at all these stages. If the excuse that someone uses for abortion would not apply here for a child this age, you shouldn't apply it here because they're both human beings. Just for example, the issue that we talked about of child abuse. If she's being abused at this age, we protect her. We don't kill her. The same would be true here of potential abuse. We protect her. We don't kill her. The same is true if you look if she was mentally handicapped, if she had some kind of difficulties at this age, we wouldn't murder her. We would help her. The same is true here. If we find out there's a disability in the womb, we don't kill her because of it. We love her and we nurture her and we continue to support her throughout life. They're both human beings. If an argument won't work here, if you can't justify murdering a child at any of these ages, even here, you can't use it here because medically speaking, scientifically speaking, all are human beings. All, according to Scripture, have intrinsic value because they're made in the image of God, made in the image of God, made in the image of God. So if an argument doesn't work here or here or here or here or here, it should not be valid here. So that's something to think about. Here's another argument people say, and we just touched on this: no mentally challenged or physically deformed child should be brought into this world. Mentally challenged and physically deformed babies inside the womb are human beings. Killing them inside the womb is no different than killing them outside the womb. And we just looked at that. Another argument: a woman who becomes pregnant through rape should not have to carry and give birth to a child that would be a reminder of such a traumatic experience. This is perhaps the most difficult one to answer, and I'll say this. Rape is one of the worst indignities a person can suffer. We must have great compassion for rape victims. However, several things must be kept in mind. First, there is no way to become unraped. Becoming unpregnant via abortion cannot make one unraped. And we know this, if you talk to people that have experienced this, no matter what you do, if you get an abortion, you still have the trauma of being raped to deal with. So continuing with that thought, rape and abortion share this in common. They are both acts of violent assault against an innocent victim. Aborting a child conceived through rape simply extends this pattern of violence and victimhood. It does not unrape the woman, but it will almost certainly increase her regret. So even though that's a difficult thing to think about, even in the case of rape, we would say that biblically speaking, that it's still a human being, and that violence against that child does not take away the violence that was done to that woman through the rape. It is important to point out that conception seldom occurs from rape, so the percentage of babies born of rape is actually quite small, but the few babies who are conceived by rape also have a right to live. Why should we punish the innocent product of a rape? Let's punish the rapist. So just consider that, once again, when it comes to rape. Reasons for abortions, I think most people are unaware of this. When you look at it, the percentage that, and this is on the high end, 0.5, pregnancy as a result of rape, fetal health problems. See, this is where it's even debatable for some people. But all of these other things that you look at, physical health problems sometimes could be a reason, but would interfere with education and a career. I find that very disheartening. Not mature enough to raise a child, don't want to be a single mother, done having children, can't afford a baby, not ready for a child. I mean, come on, a majority of the abortions that take place, some of you would argue with this, but the majority, according to statistics, are done just out of convenience. They're not done because of medical issues. So just remember that. A woman should not be forced to carry and give birth to an unwanted child. So once again, think about this. Should mothers be allowed to kill a 1-week-old child that they decide they no longer want? Absolutely not. If it is not okay to kill an unwanted child outside of the womb, why would it be okay to kill an unwanted child inside the womb? Both are human beings, according to science, created in the image of God. Now, once again, let me say this. Just because we do not want someone else around does not mean we have the right to kill them. Thank goodness. We should never place the convenience of one person over the right for another to live. Let that settle in. We should never place the convenience of one person over the right for another to live. So to close out, I just wanted to give you a position on abortion, my personal position. I believe that the Bible, as well as the most current scientific evidence, supports the belief that life begins at the moment of conception. Therefore, I believe that elective abortion is morally wrong and that we should work to protect the life of the unborn because they are created in the image of God. The only exception would be in the rare case where the mother's life is truly at risk by the continuation of the pregnancy. This would be a case where the choice is between the loss of one life, the babies, and the loss of two lives, both the babies and the mothers. And research shows that's a very, very small percentage. So I hope that you find this helpful. This is a very difficult subject, but as followers of Jesus, we cannot ignore this issue. There is no greater cause that we have than to stand up for the rights of the unborn. So I hope you'll find it helpful and maybe even share it. Thanks, guys.